If they don't accept you for who you are, 100%, you don't need them. Hi, I'm Shannon, and this is part 76 of Was I in a Cult? There's a very popular Christian song that came out in 1995 called Come Just As You Are by Crystal Lewis. And it was a song that flooded the airwaves of all the Christian stations, and most of the churches that I knew of, including ours, had adopted that song as one of their favorite songs to sing at church. And they had people do it as a solo, we sang it as a group, the choir sang it. It was just a very popular song. I remember hearing that song and thinking, this is a great song, but it's not true. I had only been in the church a year, but I had also been asked to change almost everything about myself. I was told pretty much on a daily basis that I needed to die to self and not be who I was and not come as I am. Since I had come to church, I had changed the way I dressed, the way I did my hair, the way I did my makeup, and I even had women approach me and tell me that I should change the way I did my eyebrows because they were making me look like I was too hard. Basically, all of the women in the church were trained to look a certain way, dress a certain way, act a certain way, and just their appearance was changed because they wanted to look like the leadership. They wanted to look like the pastor's wife, like they dressed like her, they looked like her in all the ways. And that was basically modeled for us so that we would all conform. It didn't leave much room for people to have their own style or their own unique way of looking, like they basically were looked at as kind of outcasts if they didn't, you know, sort of style their hair or do their makeup in the way that was appropriate for church. And I get how, like, if you change your life, sometimes your appearance changes, but that should come from the individual. The person that, wants to change, changes on their own because they feel they want to change, not because it's being told to them by their leadership that they need to change their appearance. And something even deeper was happening with me because even though my outward appearance was changing, there was something deep inside of me within my own identity that was, being hidden. And, you know, I was discovering that I was a lesbian, and I was discovering who I was as an individual, and realizing that my attractions were towards women, and that I still, after years of trying to have an attraction towards men, they were never happening. So I had to struggle with the fact that, in our church, most of the women were being trained and taught that they should be praying for that man of God and waiting for him to, appear into their lives, and not to, like, you know, just to be saving yourself for this man of God that was going to enter into your life. And what scared me the most was that I was afraid that a man of God was going to try to, you know, come into my life because I didn't want that. And I just remember, like, I was like, I'm not going to pray for that because I definitely don't want that to happen. I prayed that my desires would change and that I wouldn't no longer have attractions or desires to be with women, because at the time I thought that was sinful because that's what I was told. But I definitely wasn't going to go the extra mile and try to pray for some man of God to enter my life. And I knew too many times that I would see other people get, like, paired up by leadership and pastors that would say, like, they would try to be matchmakers, and they would be like, this is the man that God has called you to be with. And even, like, women would be, like, not even wanting to date someone. Like, for instance, there was a woman that I knew that was, basically in the situation of trying to change her identity as well. And, like, she was presented with this guy that she was supposed to start dating because apparently the pastors and the pastors' wives and the leadership thought that they would make a great couple. So they were basically having like these arranged dating and arranged marriages within our church, in a sense, because people were listening to their leadership and whoever their leadership thought was supposed to be with them. And, like, it wasn't like your normal, I think I like this guy, and as a matter of fact, whenever someone did go to their leadership and say that they liked some guy, if the leader didn't like that person for them, then they would just say, nope, that's not the man of God for you. And it's like they would basically tell them no, they couldn't date, and just forget about that. And so until your leader approved of someone that they thought was good for you, they wouldn't really allow it. And I can't believe that that was actually a thing. It's like, what is this, some kind of arranged marriages within this church? Like, what is actually happening here? And I was so scared that some leader was going to come to me at some point in time and point out some dude and tell me that that's who they heard from God that I was supposed to be with. Like, I was like terrified that that would happen. So anytime any leaders would ever talk to me about, like, if who I felt like, God had for me or whatever, I would just be like, no, I think I'm called to be celibate. I don't think I'm supposed to be with anybody. I think I'm just supposed to focus on God's will and plan for my life. And I don't think that includes any man. The fact that these life choices were being made by leadership and pastors over people's lives is so scary. And then there was also some major hypocrisy going on, because in the youth ministry there would be like two people, a couple that would get together, and then they would have an oops and accidentally get pregnant. And then, and I'm talking about people in leadership in the church, and not just in the youth, but as adults as well. And then they would just go ahead and get them married and then bless it all, and then they would stay in leadership or like return to leadership quite immediately, which was like, what is happening? Meaning I can't even trust my own decisions and my own thought process of who I want to date. I'm supposed to allow these other people to choose for me, and they're over there, doing all the things they're telling us not to do. There's always a double standard in church, especially when it comes to the pastor's kids and the leadership and their children. I think the only survival tool I had in that church was to just use that scripture about, not getting married and, just devoting myself entirely to God. And that made me feel safe and secure that I wouldn't be paired off by some pastor or leader into a marriage that I didn't want. Also, let's talk about the divorce rate in churches. I think it's probably higher than in regular society, to be honest. Um, these churches preach, how you have to like submit to your husband and all these things, right? And how you shouldn't get divorced and how all of these things, right? But yet all these pastors and leaders that are preaching these things to their congregation end up getting divorced too. So, like, again, a double standard. I kind of got off topic and started talking about stuff that had nothing to do with what I originally was going to talk about, and I didn't really get on with my story where I left off, but I just felt like some of these things needed to be said. But back to the original point that I was trying to make, if people can't accept you for who you are in your church, and they're trying to change you, and they're trying to run your life, and they're trying to basically get involved in your life to the point of where they get to tell you what to do with your life as far as who you will marry and who you will date and not date, you're probably in a cult. If you have to pretend you're something that you're not week after week, month after month, and year after year in a church, then you're definitely in a cult.